Hello and welcome back to another edition of Social Isolation Stories by Bjørn Olson. These are old adventure stories, or not necessarily always old, but they're just adventure stories of mine that I have written, and during this quarantine time, I think it's a fun way to share the content in a new way. I know that I personally really enjoy when other people do this, and so I'm making a point to, I am a videographer and I have the ability to make films look pretty nice, but I'm intentionally doing these kind of DIY because I'm hoping that this idea will infect other people, just holding up the camera and reading stories or telling stories. So anyway, that's what I'm doing, and this I think is going to be episode 6. And today I'm going to do something a little different. The past stories that I've read are like more polished things that I kind of really fuss over and spend time and often send to other people to edit and give feedback on and really work it. What I'm gonna read tonight is different from that. This is a journal that I kept when Kim and I fat biked to the Arctic. Or it was a trip we called Fat Bike to the Arctic, where we biked the Iditarod Trail, and then instead of ending in Nome, we ended in Kotzebue. And while we were on that trip, anytime we would get to a village, I would post an update on here. And I was rereading it the other day, and it's like, it's clearly not polished. It's just kind of like what I was hammering out at the time. So take it, there's a disclaimer there. But so that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to read Fat Bike to the Arctic Journal. This is from April 8th, 2014. Or I guess that was when it was completed. We started in March. Okay. When the dawn breaks, we will be gone. 2 years of meditation, hard work, and preparation have finally manifested into reality. Tomorrow we will begin biking to the Arctic. Months of serious intention go into these kinds of endeavors. Last year, we had just begun to lay the groundwork for a similar expedition when I was confronted with a terrible reality. What we all assumed was leftover effects from a concussion my mother had had in the summer. It was actually much more serious. The MRI revealed a glioblastoma brain tumor, a particularly nasty one. The words brain tumor land on your lap with a sickening thud, and the world loses color and charm. When the deafening roar of blood in my ears quieted some, we dropped everything and hurried to her side. The tumor spared some of her for me, but it rapidly wore her down. She died with her family holding her and staring, mortified, as she took her last gasp. Although she is gone, I feel her near, and believe she would be excited and enthusiastic about this adventure. We dedicate it to her. A month's worth of food awaits us along our route, and we have left more with friends to send if need be. Our bikes are packed, maps are printed, and batteries are charged. From here out, nature dictates. I wrote, for anyone who'd like to follow along, we will be transmitting as we go, and our DeLorme InReach, address, whatever. Thank you to everyone who helped us bring this trip to fruition. We are forever grateful for your friendship and patronage. And I forgot to mention that I put little, at each of the posts, I titled them. So this one is the first one from the trail, and it's titled Out Biking Climate Change. We have made it to Skwentna and have enjoyed our first of likely to be mini trail cheeseburgers. The trail is fast and hard with very little snow over ice, which is a good thing because it's 40 degrees today. If there were more snow, it would be sloppy and we would be pushing, but as it is, we are merely cruising along in what seems like late April weather. We have a food drop here, and our next one will be at Rainy Pass Lodge. If all goes as planned, we will let the dogs pass us there unless the trail is great, and then we may hurry over the pass. It was strange to get rained on in our shelter last night, but with the wood stove going, we were able to dry out our damp gear. All our equipment is performing amazingly well so far, and as of yet, no body ailments. It feels amazing to be underway after all the time thinking about the trip. We are finally doing it. This one is called Beasts of Burden. In 2011, Kim and I rode the Iditarod Trail to McGrath. On that trip, we were equally prepared, conditioned, and enthusiastic, as we are now. On that trip, however, we were hot out the gates. As a result, Kim strained her knee early and it never healed. In fact, it became worse. While planning for this trip, we were both nervous about her knee and resolved to go easy at the beginning. So far, the strategy has worked gangbusters. We are becoming leaner and meaner by the day. With the trail being hard and fast, we decided to head over Rainy Pass before the dogs and planned to stop in Roan to let the Iditarod come through. Descending Rainy Pass was remarkable in that there was no snow, lots of ice, open water, and loads of roots and rocks. Perfect for bikes, but terrible for dog mushers. When we arrived in Roan, the checkers, handlers, and assorted media were all in position for the first teams to start coming through, and we were enlisted to be handlers. After the first day, it seemed like we were with the Red Cross at a site of a massive battle. Broken bones, broken sleds, broken dreams were shattered all over the yard, and full-grown men were openly crying. I can say with almost 100% certainty that 2014 will go down in infamy as the worst Iditarod trail for mushers ever. With only a handful of remaining teams behind us on the trail, we set out again on what was, for us, on bikes, a great trail. Within a few miles, we came across the rescue of a musher with a broken ankle. Hours later, we passed a concussion victim wandering around in overflow, also with a broken ankle. When we camped near open water, a musher crashed her sled into a creek and needed our help extracting it. Unreal. We have made it to Nikolai, and the last of the dogs are soon to pull out ahead of us tonight. My hunch is that we haven't seen the last of the mushers, but soon the trail will be lonelier and less hectic. I imagine there will be a lot of negative press about the Iditarod choosing to use the north route as opposed to starting in Fairbanks. I would like to say, however, that the trail crew did an outstanding job making the trail they did under these conditions. Our fat bikes are machines of burden, exquisitely designed for the task at hand, and our bodies are the beast that powers them. I am grateful to be a cyclist and not a musher. Through the woods. Crossing from the Kuskokwim drainage to the Yukon through the Anoka is some of the most remote wild terrain I've ever been in. It seems to stretch on forever. We were very lucky in our traverse, but it's easy to imagine when you're out that bad luck could be real bad luck. The snow-off trail is sugary and bottomless. Without the path, progress would be nearly futile. There was a feeling of jaws closing in on us on our way to Ruby. Each day presented a new challenge. From strong winds to new snow, the land was reclaiming its place, and the temporary trail was being erased behind us. After Iditarod passes, that stretch of trail becomes lonely. We saw 2 snow machines going north and 1 south in 4 days. Overall, our equipment is doing fine, and I can no longer imagine this kind of travel without the titanium goat wood stove. That said, we do have repairs and plan to spend a day here in Ruby. When we pulled into the village yesterday, it seemed abandoned. Finally, we found someone, and they informed us that everyone was at a potluck at the school and invited us to come. The circumstances were less than happy, as the community had just lost a loved one. We felt a little out of place, but due to the incredible hospitality and generosity we were fed and made to feel comfortable. We felt a little out of place, but due to the incredible hospitality and generosity we were fed and made to feel comfortable. I have no words to describe how much I love Alaska and Alaskans. Koyana for everything. This one's called The Northern Lights Have Seen Queer Sights. All through the Anoka, when the riding was tough, I thought, once we get to the Yukon, everything will be easier. It will be flat, well-traveled, and little streams of alcohol will come trickling down the rocks. It was not to be. The same storm also deposited snow on the river, and even though there was much more traffic, it never firmed up. Low tire pressure and low gear grinding was on the menu each day. We worked twice as hard for less than half the miles, but we can't complain, as we were able to almost always ride. I inquired before we left home about an old friend who lives in Galena and was told that he was in Fairbanks. After an icky picnic of potato chips, processed cheese dip, and candy in front of the Galena store, I inquired again about my friend. He was indeed there, living on a boat after his home was destroyed in last spring's breakup. We went and found him. Many moons ago, when I first knew Jake, he and 2 others were preparing to float the Yukon River from Circle in a homemade raft, replete with a greenhouse and a chicken coop. They made it to Galena, and Jake never left. We spent the night catching up in his comfortable, if small, houseboat. His life on the river has been rich in experience. A Neolithic Athabascan lifestyle suits his Russian personality, and it's hard to imagine living anywhere else, save Siberia. Jake kept mentioning in passing a character named Sidney. Finally, I interrupted him to ask, "Do you mean Sidney Huntington?" "Indeed, the same. Sidney Huntington is alive in Galena at the age of 99. Jake appreciated our excitement and arranged for us to meet him the following day. Sidney is deaf, 99, and lives in Galena Pioneer Home, but his mind is 100% there. We wrote questions on paper, and he let out amazing tales of growing up on the Koyukuk and the Yukon, politics, Pebble, and the current state of the state. Everyone said he was in good form for meeting people. The conversation was followed by a meal of beaver that had been caught by one of his sons and cooked to perfection by one of his daughters. For those who have read Shadows on the Koyukuk, you will no doubt understand my being starstruck. For those who have not, proceed to the closest bookseller, buy a copy and read it. You will not regret reading the tales of this legendary Alaskan. We are off the river and preparing for a new chapter, the portage. If all goes well, we will receive our package in the Caltag post office tomorrow morning and be on the trail for Norton Sound. We have passed the 3-week mark, and life at home feels long ago. Because of our amazing camp, we do not feel spent or exhausted. Even after a hard day, an evening around the warm stove with hot drinks, food, and blissful sleep revives the soul and readies the body for a new day. Tomorrow will be another new day. This one's called Portage. My friend Higgs says that adventure isn't what you planned for, but rather what you didn't plan for. If this is true, our adventure has ramped up since Caltag. We pulled into Caltag off the Yukon in the evening and were unable to receive our 6th of 9 food drops from the post office, so we met some locals and slept indoors. The next morning at 9 a.m. I went to the PO, explained who I was and that I should have a box. The woman said there was no box for me there, and maybe it was with the rest of the Ultrasport boxes at the school. Okay. When I found the office woman at the school and explained myself, she immediately began apologizing and said she assumed we had all come through. Why is she apologizing, I wondered. When she opened the storeroom door, I understood. Flat rate boxes were all over the place, opened and ransacked. Most people who know me as a mild-mannered, fun-loving, down-to-earth person. People who know me well also know that buried deep in my Viking genes lives an often dormant berserker. When the scales of moral outrage are tipped beyond a certain point, the berserker awakens and takes charge, and I watch passively through my eyes as he takes care of business. Normally, I would never raise my voice to an educator of children. They are the nation's most prized possessions. We should erect statues in their honor and should value them above military generals, pop stars, and politicians. But this was wrong. The berserker had a conversation with the teacher. "I'll never let this happen again," she said, as I stormed out of the building. "Good," I said. "It better not." Once we supplemented our missing food at the local store, we hit the trail for Unalakleet over the Caltag Portage. We were on, for the first time in weeks, a firm trail, and a brisk east wind was at our back. Weeks ago, while pushing hard on the pedals in soft snow, I heard a pop sound come from my drivetrain and felt my crank spin without resistance. I didn't need to look to know that I had snapped my chain. Although the chain was only a week out of the box before we left, I was not too surprised. This kind of riding is hard on chains. However, when I went to replace the pin in the spliced chain, I was alarmed at how easy it slid in. It felt like I could have pushed it back in with my fingers rather than a mechanical puller. Breaking links in a chain has become an almost daily occurrence since then, sometimes more than once a day. I lost so many links that in the final push to Unalakleet, I had 2 options for gear shifting. This chain, mind you, is advertised as being perfect for all weather, year-round conditions. Pure marketing. It's junk. I blame myself for not being more critical at home when I had the chance. However, when I have to take my gloves off in 0-degree weather with 20-mile-an-hour winds, my blame and wrath are on the manufacturer. We've been building chains since before the Industrial Revolution. Hasn't this technology and engineering been resolved long ago? On the Caltag Portage, there are 2 BLM shelter cabins. Just before reaching the first one, my chain broke again. This time, while repairing it, I looked down at my derailleur and noticed that the bearings of one of my pulleys was blown out. It's the little things that'll get you. I pushed the bike to the cabin and hoped that I could find some solution to the problem. Inside, I found a small flat file and a washer. After 3 hours of filing, I had rounded the washer to fit into the bearing race and then cobbled together with a ballpoint pen and tinfoil an inner sleeve. Surprisingly, it worked. It's nearly impossible to be frustrated or angry long on the portage in perfect March weather. This is an ancient path separating two cultures, the interior Athabascan and coastal Inupiat. We felt Susan Butcher looking down on us from her perch atop Old Woman Mountain and imagined all the adventurers who have passed through this corridor. We've been having the kind of March days that I spend the other 11 months dreaming about. Our friend Derek from Psychological has sent me a new chain and pulley. We have received our 7th food drop and are now on the coast. There are many favorable trail reports north of Koyuk, as the caribou are there and hunters have been out. The adventure continues. I only hope it be the kind we planned for and not the kind we didn't. Sea ice. My favorite memory of riding a bike was from 1998 when I rode from Nome to Unalakleet. The day I left Koyuk, there was a 30-mile-an-hour north wind at my back and the trail across the sea ice was rock hard. As I rode, Fata Morgana, a mirage, played tricks on my eyes, and the Reindeer Mountains stretched vertically into wild and unearthly contortions. I made it to the shelter cabin in blissfully quick couple of hours. As we drew near to the coast on this trip, I began to quietly fret about that 30-mile-an-hour wind. As Dick Griffith says, the wind is always blowing from the direction you're going. Our passage on Norton Sound has been without incident or undue suffering. The trail has again firmed up, the winds have been very light, and the sun shone strong. Happy hunters stop on their way to or returning from the caribou and continue to give us favorable reports from the trail north. This is a good time of year, maybe the best. As we pulled into Koyuk, Kim stopped to draw attention to the fact that we will be leaving the now very familiar Iditarod and Iron Dog trail markers. We see these orange and blue markers in our sleep and must have passed many thousand of them at this point. From here, we diverge and take a new trail to the north, to the Arctic Circle. Very exciting. We have met many amazing people on our trip so far, but it's always refreshing to see an old friend. Robin Child has been teaching for the last 2 years here in Koyuk and greeted us as we pulled in. We slept in her yurt last night, had dinner of fresh caribou and seal oil, and stayed up way past our bedtime, telling stories. I feel lucky to know so many amazing women who are unbridled from the structure and confines of traditional womanhood, and who make life the way they wish. Make life the way they wish to live. Rural Alaska seems to have an abundance of empowered women who are not afraid to chop wood, haul water, build boats, shoot guns, etc., and be both educators and students to the place they make their home. Robin is one of these women. Again, we are waiting for the mail plane. The remaining part of my bike part has been on almost as wild trip as we have been. Sent to Unalakleet, forwarded to Koyuk, missent to Shaktoolik, returned to Unalakleet, and finally re-forwarded to Koyuk. Sure hope it makes it. One more food drop remains, and if all goes well, the next post will be from above the Arctic Circle. We've made it to Buckland. Oh, this one is called Seward Peninsula. We've made it to Buckland over the Seward Peninsula. This will be our last food drop before the Circle and Kotzebue. Spent a few hours soaking in granite hot springs and had my derailleur pulley hand delivered by our friend Robin. This morning we left Beaver Creek Shelter Cabin early in the most incredible ice fog. This landscape is so vast and devoid of forest, and the fog added to the deep mystery of our surroundings. It broke by early afternoon, and we rode an amazing trail into the village, where once again, as luck would have it, there was a potluck going on at the school. This time it was a celebration of life, and even though we stuck out like sore thumbs, it was less awkward, and our presence was an accent to the theme. Where do you come from? Why do you do this? Are you scared? With a mouthful of food, we tried our best to answer these questions, and started in with our own. We have been eating well on the whole trip, but it seems to just get better the further north we get. White and black muktuk, caribou steak, caribou burger, fowl soup, moose sausage, seal oil, aguduk, and lots of dry fish. We're spending the night in the school and hope that the PO still has our box in the morning so we can hit the trail on the home stretch. April Fools. Buckland to Kotzebue is well traveled and should be really good trail for you guys. This is a statement we heard since Koyuk. As we drew near to Buckland, the same sentiment was repeated and our confidence grew. In Buckland we met an older man who grew up in Candle and began driving dogs at an early age. Beyond giving us trail advice, he filled us in with stories of his youth, growing up in the region and running dogs. Buckland has the honor of being the Alaskan community with the most dog teams, I believe, per capita than anywhere else. The pertinent trail description was very clear and came from the lips of a well-traveled veteran. Follow the Buckland River to the bay. Across the bay, follow the shore of the Baldwin Peninsula until you come to a shelter cabin where the trail will cross the peninsula. From there, just follow the trail to Kotzebue. His advice sounded straightforward and within our means. And yes, it should be well marked and well traveled, he said. The river was windswept, free of snow, and therefore very fast. When we reached the bay, there was a fork in the trail. One went east across the ice and the other west, which seemed to follow the shore, perhaps to Candle or Deering. We headed east and crossed the bay, but rather than follow the shore, the trail went on land and headed east. Moose, herds of caribou, and fox filled this beautiful valley, but after a few miles of due east travel we stopped. This seems wrong, Kim said, and I agreed. For the first time on the trip, we backtracked and returned to the intersection. Back at the fork, we headed west for a few miles, but this too didn't seem to fit the description at all. The trail seemed to stay on the north side of the Seward Peninsula, and we needed to cross the sea ice to the other side. Totally confounded, we returned once again to the intersection and hoped someone would be out that could set us straight. After an evening of meditation, we convinced ourselves that the first trail seemed to make the most sense, and once again we headed east. Past our previous turnaround, we saw a herd of caribou in the many hundreds. We tried to be stealthy on our approach, but they saw us and ran. When they did, it sounded like a roar of thunder, and the light from the snow kicked up into a cloud in their wake. Amazing. Eventually we came to a shelter cabin. The morning was chilly, and so we went in, lit a fire, and hoped to find clues to settle our uncertainty. We found none. Our insecurity became oppressive, but we decided to continue on. Well, no one has ever biked to Selawik either, I joked. Outside, the distant sound of an approaching snow machine was welcome. We went out and waited for it. Nope, this trail goes to Selawik, the driver said. You need to go back to the fork and follow it. Most Bucklanders have been using another trail that you will eventually intersect while crossing the bay. Our sage wisdom had come from someone who had not been out this year, and because of the rough shore ice, people had opted for a new route across the bay. The next day, we were on the east shore of the Baldwin Peninsula, heading north to our final destination. We were both excited to be within hours of completion. No one had ever done what we were doing, and getting to Kotzebue under our own steam has been an ethereal goal for so long, but I couldn't help feeling a little sad, too. This has become life. Wake up and ride. Stop and camp. Repeat. The further north we go, the better it gets, just like I imagined it would. I was tired, but I wasn't ready to stop. At an early part of the day, 2 hunters stopped to inspect our bikes and inquire with the usual line of questions. Where did you come from? Being the most common. Through the goggles, parka, and hood, and hat, I thought I recognized one of the hunters. Are you Seth Kantner? I asked one of them. Yes, he said. Winters in Alaska are long and dark. As a result, I developed a love for reading at a young age. There are too many favorite authors of mine to list. But when the categorization is whittled some, it becomes easier. Without question, if someone asks me what my favorite Alaskan books are, I respond, Ordinary Wolves by Seth Kantner and Shadows on the Kyokuck about Sidney Huntington. We met the giants of Alaska lore while on the trail. Perfect. Our next encounter was with a hunter returning to Buckland after delivering caribou meat to elders in Kotzebue. He wore the face of a man who lived life on the trail, sunburnt cheeks, well-worn clothing, and a generous smile that stretched to his ears. Do you like muktuk? He asked. Yes, we do. He reached into his sled and opened an Alaska commercial shopping bag and handed us a fat chunk of this precious energy food. At the next shelter cabin, we ate nearly half of it, and we didn't need to snack for the rest of the day. Because the Baldwin Peninsula is low elevation, the wind generators of Kotzebue were visible for hours. We finally passed them and came to the end of the trail at an intersection of road. We stopped to savor the moment, and Kim began to cry. The little trail in Knik, where we had parked our car 37 days earlier, had led us to the Arctic. Beyond being on a bike, this felt like something more. More than on any other trip. Sorry. Beyond being a bike trip, it felt like something more. More than on any other trip, I felt like we had tapped into something very hard to describe. It felt like we had tapped into the heart of Alaska, and it seemed strong and full of life. Thank you very much for listening to this latest edition of Social Isolation Adventure Stories. Hope you tune in for the next one, and I hope that everyone is taking good care of themselves and one another. And yeah, share your stories. I think it's a great time right now to get your stories out there. Your friends and your family and maybe other people you don't even know might just really love to hear from you. Okay, talk to you soon.